Hi everyone, my name is Madison Leonard and I'm the product marketing lead for core platform at ClickUp. And I'm so excited today to talk with David, Director of Digital Europe with STANLEY Security. David, hi.
Yeah, hey, how you doing, Madison? Glad to be here.
Good. I'm so glad you're here. We've been chatting for the last couple of months and I've really gotten to know your story and how you got to be at STANLEY, but I'd love to just dive right in. How did you end up at STANLEY Security?
Okay, so I started with STANLEY Security in June of, we're in 2021, 2020. It was in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and I was hired to basically help accelerate and empower the European teams wherever I could be of value, work under the guidance of my boss, Wasim Kawaf, who is the VP of Global Digital over at STANLEY Security.
That's awesome. That's so good to hear. Today we're going to be really going in depth on kind of how ClickUp was adopted throughout your global teams. So before we do that, I'd like to kind of set more of context for everybody. Can you tell me about what life was like before you integrated ClickUp?
When I got to STANLEY, that was in the middle of the COVID pandemic. Everybody was freaking out, everybody was overloaded, a lot of insecurity about where the world was going, where jobs were going. And on top of that, companies having to pivot to an online work environment almost overnight. Sometimes it just takes a fresh face from the outside to come in and make some small changes. So I arrived, clearly, everybody was in the middle of just overwhelm and stress. And I started slowly using with some teams the introducing ClickUp, and really what I think I did was throw a match on a dry Kindle already soaked in petrol, because everybody just kind of really made it their own, and it's been a group and team effort ever since. And that's how I got to STANLEY and how things started.
I think that, when we were talking earlier in the last couple of months, you mentioned kind of that you hit the ground running when you first started, right? There was a lot of people who had a lot of pent up energy. Now we're in this remote work environment, which was kind of new. So did you encounter any challenges when you first came on board, just having been in that remote environment for such a short period of time?
Challenges galore. Well, first of all, again, like the challenges of everybody being overwhelmed and overworked, that's a challenge. If you bring in a new system, a new platform, that always comes with fears, insecurities. There's always an unconscious danger signal over there. If you are working 120% of your capacity and now you have to start thinking about using yet another tool in order to manage your activities and get your stuff done and manage your team, that potentially just adds to your workload, right? So if you're already overwhelmed, the idea of wanting to spend your energy on anything else other than your core activities is not very high. What everybody really was after was, of course, reduced workload and reduced stress. So seeing from how ClickUp as a tool could actually really kind of achieve, some of these core needs that everybody shared, was really kind of the selling point for people to buy into the ClickUp as a tool. And then slowly figuring out how to make it happen, and the result is that actually a lot of stress was reduced. We did some internal surveys from which that shows. But yeah, there's internal huddles. Another huddle is platform fatigue. It's just like another platform that we have to spend energy on. So yes, I mean, you're going to really encounter anybody, just like we did, some challenges along the way. But you address them, you move over them, you get the payoffs, you get the wins, and sometimes the losses as well. And it's been a good journey for us, and we're still on it.
Yeah. And I remember you also talking about this sort of like emergency kind of culture, right? You would have a lot of emergency meetings. Sometimes there was a lot of frequent email communications, things getting lost because the communications were all over the place. Can you touch on that just a little bit?
Well, I think it was almost kind of like natural consequence of an organization having to pivot from a traditional organization to a virtual organization overnight without really having the time which you normally have. We normally had to acquire the tools and the habits to figure things out as you go. I mean, it was almost kind of, get thrown in the pool without knowing how to swim and either, swim or sink. So what you revert to is, of course, meetings and email. Email as a project management tool is really one of the most horrible, potentially destructive tools out there. Not that email is wrong, but as a product management, because what happens is that everybody's on the same thread. Somebody has a question. Everybody else sees that, then other people jump in, and you have this out of control domino effect where little things turn into giant issues. Everybody was aware of, the executive team already was aware of, they had a vision of really kind of like a virtual platform. So if you have a team that is acutely already aware and awake of what is not working, you really have the foundation on which you can build and create something else. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what is so great about your story is kind of you have this bottom up adoption movement where people really got into ClickUp immediately. They adopted it fast, and I think getting that along with the executive buy-in was really the key to your success. Can you talk a little bit more about that as well?
Okay, so bottom up, I mean, that's also because the culture over at Stanley is one where people really pride autonomy, being self-directed, being self-motivated. People are very passionate about what they do. I made the mistake of coming in and thinking that my vision in terms of the ideal best practices and the best ways of doing things was really the way things should be done. Anybody out there, I think, if there's one takeaway from our conversation, is like, don't make that mistake. Empower everybody else, and then what you see and how you see people use and take ownership of the tool will most likely blow you out of the water anyway, of solutions and things that you never thought of before. Really empower, let go of control, set up some basic rail guards. So like a basic framework, some framework that guides everybody's, and adjust them along the way. Hand it over. Empower other people, let them figure out the solutions, and find the people who are really the champions in your organization. Find the different use cases. We ran surveys in terms of understanding what people's needs were, understand with empathy as much as possible, what people are struggling with, and build your solutions around that. As you go through the adoption, especially of something big as pivoting over to a virtual organization and bringing a tool like ClickUp, regardless of where you're at, is don't try to do everything at the same time. Take a few use cases, figure out where your 80-20 of the 80-20 is, right? Like the 4% that is responsible for the 64% of the results. Figure out like the most essential things, whether that's meetings, whether that's like some core SOPs, whether that's task management, and focus on what is the biggest pain point within the organization, and start with that.
And what were some of those for you? What were some of those key use case points?
For us, it was, we started out with really ClickUp as our central task and team management system, just diligently and disciplined putting all of our tasks into ClickUp so that people and teams could see kind of like what everybody else was working on. We had a adoption roadmap where, as you implement and start with a particular use case, teaching and empowering people with the skills to use ClickUp increasingly more sophisticated. So then it becomes adding timelines and dependencies depending on where people are, for real kind of like team management, weekly meetings, like reviewing, where you're at. We started with meeting notes. We kept all of our meeting notes in ClickUp, which is it has made a big difference. SOPs, again, like that's a really big one, figuring out what some of the core operating procedures are, thinking about the 2080. And then also setting up a depository, a resource depository for all of the current project management related resources. So there's always one place to go to where you can find whatever external or internal source you need for a particular project, and those get archived the moment the project is done. So those are a few. I mean, there's a few others, but those really are the few core ones. Yeah.
And what about teams? I know you guys have teams stationed really all over. Can you break that down as far as how many teams you do have currently on ClickUp, as well as where they are?
The way the organization is set up, we have a global organization that has the branding, that has the digital team that is really there to support the other teams. And then, for example, in Europe, we have the different regions, whether it's like Scandinavia or the United Kingdom or Central Europe. Really the regional teams. North America, that's the way it is set up.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just think it's so cool that you have so many teams located all over the world, and you're able to bring everything into one place, like a single source of truth in a way, to be able to communicate and execute everything really efficiently. I know that you kind of mentioned earlier on about the culture of having multiple email threads. Conversations are kind of scattered between a lot of different places. So I would imagine that having kind of that online remote solution would be not only effective for the time we're in now, but also the fact that you have teams everywhere.
So you have teams everywhere with different cultures, different ways of thinking, different ways of doing things. Some cultures are more ad hoc, in the flow, improvise. Other cultures tend to be more structured. I think it harks back to a really, really, really important point, is kind of like finding the right balance between setting up some basic railguards, some basic best practices, and then just the space where everybody gets to allow to play and experiment as they please. So yes, it's definitely a fun ride. That's,
yes.
Yeah.
That's for sure. And you guys have really only been, I believe, on ClickUp for the last year and a half. Is that about right?
Yeah, like even a little less. Like I'd say like a year and 3 months. Yeah. And as it normally happens, you start somewhere very small, and then slowly but steadily, like the brushwood catches fire, and then before you know, the whole forest is at flames. And that's kind of like where we're at right now. Like things are just like really accelerating. Like another business unit has kind of adopted a ClickUp as well. There's a lot of cross-pollination. So yeah, people are definitely getting a lot of benefit from it.
I'm curious, I know you mentioned something about an internal survey, I think you said, where employees kind of gave their thoughts on life after ClickUp and kind of how things looked after that. If I remember correctly, there were some pretty astounding results from that, right?
So we had an initial survey that we did. Gosh, like time flies. That we did like in the first 5 months, and that really was first 4 months. That was really about, again, trying to understand what people's pain points are, what the big wins are, where the high returns, low effort focus really ought to be, and really just like trying to understand. And then we did one 6 months after that to kind of like see where the shifts were. If you look at the results and the feedback, that people feel less stressed, people feel less overwhelmed. There is a reduction in meeting time. The one thing I have to say that is an addiction that is really difficult to shake is email. So we're really diligently trying to move our communication inside of ClickUp. And again, once you start communicating task-related messages in ClickUp itself, it's almost, you don't want to go back to email, but you have to kind of get past that hump. So all in all, really positive. Yeah.
Yeah, I can attest to that too. I feel like I didn't know what life was like outside of ClickUp prior to really getting involved in it, because email was so heavily relied upon in every organization, and then once ClickUp is there, it really takes the pressure off of the long email threads and kind of the lost messages, and everything's kind of in its place. So
it's really
I
been a
definitely
game
can
changer.
attest to that.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Totally.
I'd love to know a little bit about life today. We talked about life previous to ClickUp. We kind of talked about a couple months in and everybody really enjoying it. What does life look like now? You've grown the amount of teams that have been on. You have also taken on more projects, I'm sure, within the platform. So what does that look like right now?
Okay, so right now everybody uses a ClickUp and there's kind of almost like the unspoken truth that if an activity is not in ClickUp, it doesn't exist. So we're pretty disciplined about that. Something that we started with recently that again has made like a really big difference, not only for management in terms of being able to report up, but also really to help focus on, for individual team members, is using goals. We started using that for our quarterly goals, having a quarterly meeting, setting up our OKR goals in the goals section. We created a dashboard where you can see exactly the goals for each individual team member. And I can tell you just from personal experience, but I believe that I share that with everybody else, that in a world where it is so easy to get distracted, to have something to fall back to just keep you in the right track and answer the question of what I am working on, is that moving forward the goals that we've set for the team, for me personally, is really invaluable. So we started that with a few of our teams, and that is something that over time will get bigger adoption as well. I'm sure.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love that, the story and your journey coming from really being in this place where you needed a tool that was implemented fast, that could be used in this remote environment with global teams, and to get such quick adoption from that bottom-up kind of movement up till today, still being successful. It's fantastic. I think that's awesome.
The credit again goes to really the team, and it goes to the executive team. The executive team had the vision, and already had it on their roadmap of wanting to pivot over to a virtual organization. And then if you're working with a bunch of hard-headed, highly intelligent freaks, then you let this loose, and they'll take ownership from it, and they will stun and surprise everybody.
But I mean, you're being humble, but you are definitely an important part of getting this adopted, for sure.
Yeah, did my little 2 cents bit, you know.
Yeah, no, you definitely were. I'd love to know kind of like what the lessons were in all of this, having been here kind of like almost towards a year and a half now of ClickUp and seeing things move very, very quickly within this like rapid remote work environment. If there's anybody out there who has a small team and they're trying to expand to bigger organizations, what would you say is the biggest lesson and biggest piece of advice that you could give?
Really take the time to understand what the needs, the fears, the insecurities of your team members are. And we kind of like touched on that already before. You know, you're coming with a new tool, or you're already, you know, you're trying to get better adoption from already having ClickUp within your organization. Understanding the needs and aligning people's needs with the benefits they'll eventually get is absolutely crucial. The second big lesson for me personally is do not have the arrogance to believe that you have the answer. And you know, I certainly was guilty of having this vision of how things were going to be and how people were going to work, and you like throw that out of the window, because the end result is not going to be what you envisioned, and the end result is going to be a lot more interesting and a lot more educational and inspiring if you just really let go and empower other people instead of pushing your own vision onto an org. It's not going to work anyway. But so that's a big personal lesson for me. There's another one, and that is, don't assume because you know something that other people know it as well. So
that's a really good point.
Yeah. So if you have been, have some skill within ClickUp, assume that other people don't have it. So go over the basics and make sure that you take everybody with you, because otherwise you're just going to leave people behind, and that will hamper addition. So I think those three.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And I think the point that you touched on about the customization, like giving people the freedom to do what they want within of ClickUp, is so powerful because of the customization option. So you're able to really do more things, have more workflows spread across different organizations and teams, and I think it really just adds to that heightened ability. So I definitely agree there.
There's another thing that I think has made a really big difference for us, and that is really have teams share their experiences. So for example, we have a weekly digital meetup, where people come, and then there's different presentations, and it can be from social media to God knows what. And really people seeing how other teams use it and sharing their things has a wonderful cross-pollination, pollinating effect as well.
Your story is so incredible, so I really do appreciate you coming here to share your story about the adoption of ClickUp at STANLEY Security. Really can't thank you enough. This has been really a big opportunity to speak with you, so thank you again, David.
Thanks, Madison. Thanks for all the support. Thanks for all the love you guys have brought to our efforts. And yeah, my pleasure, really.